The cul-de-sac of Evergreen Acres looked like every real estate brochure's wet dream. Manicured lawns shaved to exactly 3 inches. Identical white picket fences. And American flags fluttering at the exact 45-degree angle mandated by Section 4.2 of the Covenants. But beneath that postcard perfection lived the kind of quiet tyranny that only an HOA could enforce. My name is Rachel Donovan, and by the time I was 28, I had learned that the most dangerous monsters don't hide under beds. They hide behind clipboards and smile while they fine you for existing. It started the year I turned 6, the same year my mother, Catherine, died in the master bedroom upstairs. The cancer took her fast, but the neighborhood took longer. Aunt Linda, Dad's older sister, had already been on the HOA board for 2 years. And Mom's funeral was the moment she decided the entire street needed her guidance. While Dad stared at the wall and Evan hid under the dining table, Linda marched through our front door without knocking, heels clicking like a metronome of doom. "Thomas," she announced, voice syrupy sweet. "The memorial flowers on the porch are a violation. Section 7.3, unsightly clutter. I'll have to issue a notice." She peeled the yellow warning sticker from her purse and slapped on the door like a gold star for grief. I stood in the hallway, clutching Mom's favorite lavender scarf, tears streaming, and Linda clicked her tongue. "Rachel, dear." Visible sobbing lowers property values. "The bylaws are very clear about maintaining a peaceful aesthetic. Pull yourself together for the community." That was the first fine. $300 for emotional disturbance. Dad paid it without a word. By the time I was 8, the pattern was scripture. I came home from school with the flu. Linda showed up for a wellness check because my pale face on the porch allegedly violated the healthy curb appeal clause she herself had written. No soup, no Tylenol, just another yellow ticket taped to my bedroom window. "Dramatic illness for attention," she told Dad over coffee. "You know how sensitive she is." Tommy. Catherine spoiled her. The house itself became a battlefield of invisible rules. Mom's garden, those wildflower beds she planted with me, were declared non-compliant vegetation. Linda personally oversaw their removal one Saturday while I watched from the garage window. In their place went rigid rows of identical boxwoods. "Uniformity is dignity," she preached to the neighbors who nodded like bobbleheads. Every time I cried in the yard, another fine. Every time I left a single toy on the lawn, another notice. I learned to swallow everything: fevers, tears, rage, until my sketchbooks became the only place my real voice lived. High school was a masterclass in survival. I stopped speaking at HOA meetings, stopped decorating my locker with anything personal, stopped letting anyone see me feel. Ms. Rodriguez, my art teacher, once asked why my self-portrait showed a girl with her mouth taped shut. I lied and said it was symbolism. Inside, I was already planning the escape route. The day I graduated college and loaded my Honda Civic, I felt the first real breath in 16 years. Portland was 3 states away, but it might as well have been another galaxy. Everstone Creative offered me a junior designer spot, and for 5 glorious years I lived without yellow tickets. I could cry during a sad movie without fear of a $250 fine for disturbing the peace. I could leave a coffee mug on the windowsill without Linda materializing like a bureaucratic ghost. Maya Patel became my first real friend. She laughed when I flinched the first time she hugged me. "Girl, you act like affection is a code violation." She listened, actually listened, when I finally told her about the HOA Karen who raised me. "That's not family," she said flatly. "That's emotional eminent domain." For the first time, someone named what had happened to me without calling me dramatic. Then the layoff hit. Davidson Industries pulled their contract, and 40% of the company vanished overnight. My savings evaporated in 60 days. Rent in Portland had jumped 30%. Unemployment barely covered ramen. The phone call to Dad tasted like swallowing broken glass. The garage apartment is still there, he said, voice flat. Linda thinks it might teach you responsibility. Not come home. Not your room is waiting. The garage apartment. The same one they built when Mom was dying so the night nurse wouldn't disrupt neighborhood aesthetics. I drove back on a Sunday in March. The moment my tires crossed the Evergreen Acres entrance, the welcome sign mocked me. A community of standards. My key still worked, but Linda's spare key apparently did too. She let herself in before I'd even unpacked the first box. Well, she cooed, surveying my duffel bags like they were biohazards. Reality finally caught up with the artistic lifestyle. Section 9.1 prohibits long-term storage of personal items outside approved containers. I'll give you 48 hours to comply. Dear, she smiled the same cold smile I remembered from childhood, polite on the surface, venom underneath. And the annual memorial for Catherine is in 3 weeks. You'll handle the arrangements this year. Of course. We can't have another year of your emotional displays. The days settled into a grinding rhythm of job applications by morning, rejection emails by afternoon, and Linda's inspections by evening. Every time I left a sketch on a coffee table, she appeared, clipboard in hand. Visual clutter. Rachel, the covenants are crystal clear. Section 12.4. Property values are everyone's responsibility. She'd slap a new yellow ticket on the fridge and leave humming. Neighbors nodded approvingly when they saw her car in our driveway. Linda's just looking out for us, they'd say. She keeps standards high. I threw myself into planning the memorial the way I once planned client campaigns, floors quotes, catering permits, because God forbid you host more than 8 people without an HOA event application. Even the exact shade of tablecloths that wouldn't violate the neutral palette rule. 3 days before the event, the Albany startup I'd been praying for finally emailed. Video interview scheduled for the morning of Mom's memorial. I explained the situation politely. Their reply was curt. We appreciate candidates who prioritize professional commitments. Opportunity gone. That night, Linda let herself in while I was still crying on the couch. This is exactly your problem, she said, voice dripping fake concern. Too fragile. Too emotional. Catherine spoiled you those first years. And look where it's gotten you. The community has noticed, several complaints about visible distress affecting resale values. She actually patted my shoulder. I'm only telling you this because I care. The morning of the memorial arrived gray and drizzling. Perfect weather for remembering a woman the neighborhood had already tried to forget. I'd been up since dawn, setting up the backyard under the strict guidelines of the temporary event permit I'd been forced to file. Caterers arrived at noon. Guests were due at 2. Everything was running like clockwork until I realized the photo displays were still in the master bedroom closet. I headed upstairs. Dad had kept Mom's room as a shrine he never visited. The jewelry box, antique cherry wood with a tiny brass lock, sat on her dresser exactly where it had always been. But when I opened the door, Linda was already there. She stood with her back to me, fingers sorting through the contents with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Mom's pearl necklace. The sapphire earrings Dad gave her for their 10th anniversary. The vintage emerald ring from Grandma, all sliding into Linda's designer purse. What are you doing? My voice cracked. Linda turned slowly, not a flicker of shame. That same cold smile. Taking what should have been mine to begin with. Dear, your mother had no family of her own. These pieces belong with the Donovan side of the community standards. She kept packing as if I were invisible. Those are Mom's things. I stepped forward. They're supposed to. Supposed to what? Go to you. She held up the wedding ring, turning it so the diamond caught the light like a trophy. You're not exactly stable. Rachel can barely keep a job, let alone family heirlooms. Besides, She glanced at the window where neighbors were already arriving. The HOA has a responsibility to secure valuable items during events. Section 15.7. Temporary asset protection during gatherings. I'm simply doing my duty. I reached for the purse. She laughed. Sharp and cruel. Or what? You'll tell Tommy? Let's see how that goes. As if summoned by her script, Dad appeared in the doorway. His eyes took in the scene. Linda with the jewelry. Me shaking. The open box that had always stayed locked. Dad, I said. Relief flooding me. She's taking Mom's jewelry. All of it. He looked at Linda, then at me. Not surprise. Not anger. Just the same exhausted weariness I'd seen my entire life. Rachel, don't make a scene. We have guests coming in 2 hours, and the HOA potluck starts right after. The community is watching. She's stealing Mom's jewelry. Stealing. Linda scoffed. Voice honey sweet for Dad's benefit. Thomas, talk to your daughter about her dramatics. I'm keeping them safe. This house isn't secure with Rachel coming and going at all hours. Who knows who has access? I have a proper safe at home. It's for everyone's protection. Dad raised a hand. Enough. Rachel, this is exactly the kind of behavior that got you into your current situation. Everything's a crisis. Linda has been on the board for 22 years. Managing things, helping the community. She has a right to secure valuable items during events. I stared at him. To Mom's wedding ring? Her mother's emerald ring. Linda's smile widened. Dear, you can barely keep a job. Catherine would want these with someone responsible, someone who understands community standards. You didn't even like her, I spat. You called her weak, overly emotional, said she was too soft for the neighborhood. Rachel, Dad snapped, the tone he used when closing bad deals. You're proving Linda's point. Your mother is gone. These are just things. Linda will keep them safe. And that's the end of it. We have a memorial to host. Try to compose yourself. Linda zipped the purse with a decisive snap. I'll go check on the catering setup. You might want to fix your face. Rachel, you look hysterical, and that's another violation waiting to happen. They left me standing in Mom's room, surrounded by her absence. The empty jewelry box gaped like a scream. My hands trembled, but this time the rage was clean, precise, crystalline. They had finally said it out loud. I wasn't really family. I was just what was left over, an inconvenient remainder they managed with bylaws and fines. I sank on Mom's side of the bed. Through the window, I watched Linda directing caterers, playing the perfect hostess for an event honoring a woman she had erased for 22 years. Dad nodded beside her, already moving on. The hypocrisy burned hotter than any fever I'd ever hidden. But something had shifted. The little girl who once twisted herself into knots to earn their approval was gone. In her place stood someone who finally understood that their rejection said everything about them and nothing about me. I pulled out my phone and started typing every detail, exactly which pieces, exactly what they said, timestamps, everything, because this time I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. The memorial passed in a blur of casseroles and condolences while my mind quietly built a war room in the garage apartment. Linda wore Mom's pearl necklace under her high-collared blouse, the outline barely visible when she moved. The audacity of parading stolen property at the victim's own event told me everything about how untouchable she believed she was. That night, after the last guest left, I began. Dad had installed security cameras 5 years ago after a string of break-ins. Cameras he never changed the password on. His birthday plus Linda's. Within an hour, I had crystal-clear footage. Linda entering the bedroom, methodically emptying the jewelry box in her purse while I stood there visibly distressed. The audio was muddy, but the visuals were damning. I called Evan in Boston. The silence on his end stretched until I thought the line had died. She actually said you're not family? His voice shook with fury, and Dad just let her. He cursed, rare for him. Rachel, this is theft, and she's doing it under HOA cover. We have to fight. For the first time, I had an ally ready to act. Not just comfort. We spent 2 hours planning. Evan would quietly reach out to extended family, feeling out who had noticed Linda's helpful behavior over the years. I would handle the legal and community angles. The next morning, I sat in my car outside the bank where Linda had kept an account for 30 years. At 10 a.m., sharper Mercedes pulled up. Same designer purse. I followed at a distance, pretended to fill out deposit slips, and watch her request access to her safety deposit box. 20 minutes later, she emerged, purse noticeably lighter. So that was where the jewelry lived, not in her home safe, as she claimed. That afternoon, I visited 3 pawn shops and 2 estate buyers in the county. At Goldberg's estate buyers, I struck gold. The owner recognized Linda's photo instantly. Oh yes, Mrs. Donovan. She's been a regular for years, always selling vintage pieces from deceased relatives. Lovely woman. Excellent taste. You show me their records. State law required seller ID and photos. There, in black and white, were Mom's cameo set, Grandma's ruby band, even items from other grieving families in Evergreen Acres that Linda had confiscated during HOA enforcement actions. 15 years of sales. A pattern. Maya's cousin in IT owed her a favor. Within days, the house security footage was auto-backing up to a secure cloud, impossible for Linda to erase with one convenient technical failure. I also called Mom's sister Patricia in California. She confirmed what I suspected. Mom had written letters from her hospital bed, explicitly leaving the jewelry to me on my 21st birthday. Those pieces carry the love of generations of women, Mom had written. They belonged to Rachel. Meanwhile, I played the perfect compliant resident, sending resumes, keeping the lawn at exactly 3 inches, smiling at HOA meetings. Linda grew bolder, almost cocky. Finally teaching you responsibility, she'd say loudly enough for neighbors to hear. Some people need to hit rock bottom. Evan delivered more ammunition. Cousin Beth remembered Linda helping after their grandmother's death, and suddenly several heirlooms vanished. Sworn statements started piling up. I hired Jennifer Santos, a family law attorney who specialized in estate disputes and, crucially, HOA abuse cases. She reviewed the footage and pawn records with sharpening eyes. The video is gold. The pattern of confiscations turns this from theft into a systemic fraud. Your father, as executor of your mother's estate, had a fiduciary duty. Linda's using her HOA position to commit theft under color of authority. We can nail her for breach of duty, conversion, and potentially RICO if the pattern spans multiple families. Jennifer leaned forward. Be careful. Cornered Karen's bite. But Rachel, you've got the receipts. Literally, I thought about Linda's cold smile, Dad's dismissive hand wave. They had already done their worst, told me I wasn't family, treated me like a code violation for 22 years. What more could they take? Apparently, quite a bit. The next HOA newsletter announced the annual Community Memorial Potluck would be even larger this year. Linda's book club, Dad's golf buddies, half the country club. She'd been bragging for weeks. I organized everything myself since poor Rachel just isn't capable of community standards. What she didn't know was that I had been organizing too. Patricia had overnighted the letters. Evan arrived with 6 sworn statements. Maya drove down with technical gear. The security footage was edited into a damning 3-minute reel. Pawn records were printed chronologically. The spreadsheet I built listed 15 incidents over 22 years, always during grieving periods. Always items Linda had inspected under HOA rules. Always ending up in her bank box or sold at Goldberg's. The morning of the big event, I set everything in motion. The backyard filled with guests by 6. Linda presided in a black dress I recognized as one of Mom's. Altered to fit her. She wore the pearl necklace, openly now bold. Arrogant. Untouchable. Dad stood beside her, accepting condolences with practiced gravity. Dinner was served at 7. Linda tapped her wine glass, voice honeyed with false emotion. Catherine was like a sister to me. When she passed, I promised to care for her family, especially Rachel. It hasn't always been easy. Some people struggle with responsibility, but that's what family, excuse me, what community does. We carry each other, even when it's a burden. The room murmured sympathetically. Several neighbors shot me pitying looks. Speaking of community treasures, Linda continued, touching the pearls. I thought tonight would be perfect to share something special. Catherine's jewelry. I've been safeguarding these precious pieces because that's what Catherine would have wanted. Someone responsible protecting neighborhood heirlooms. That was my cue. I stood slowly, phone already paired to the smart TV Dad had installed last year. Another HOA-approved upgrade. You're absolutely right. Aunt Linda. Let's talk about Mom's jewelry. The TV flared to life behind her. There she was in high definition, systematically emptying the jewelry box in her purse while I stood visibly distressed. The room went dead silent, except for the faint clink of metal on the recording. That was last year, I said, voice steady, the day of Mom's memorial. But it wasn't the first time. I clicked to the next slide. Pawn shop receipts spanning 15 years. All documented. All verified. Linda's face drained of color. This is ridiculous. Thomas, tell them. But Evan was already walking the room, distributing copies of Mom's letters. Our mother specifically wanted Rachel to have her jewelry. She wrote it down. She told multiple people. Yet somehow it all ended up in Linda's bank vault. Dad finally spoke. Face red. Rachel, turn that off immediately. This is a family. No, I cut in calmly. You told me I wasn't family, remember? So let's treat this like what it is. A crime committed under color of HOA authority. Mr. Goldberg stood up from the table. I'd personally invited him to. I can verify those receipts. Mrs. Donovan has been selling estate jewelry to us for years, always claiming they were from deceased family members or HOA confiscated items. The country club wives began whispering. Linda's book club friends edged away. The facade she had spent decades building cracked in real time. But I wasn't finished. The real evidence isn't just about jewelry. Next slide, the spreadsheet. 15 incidents over 22 years. Always during grieving periods. Always items Linda inspected under HOA enforcement. Always explained away as misremembering or community standards. One of Dad's golf buddies spoke up. I remember when Harold's mother died. Linda helped with the estate, and suddenly the silver tea set disappeared. Another voice. My mother-in-law's Wedgwood china. Linda was so helpful after the funeral. The room erupted. Decades of quiet suspicions finally connected. Linda had been robbing the grieving under the protection of yellow tickets and bylaws. I looked straight at her. I want my mother's jewelry back. All of it. Or we go to the police tonight. Jennifer, I gestured to my attorney, standing near the door, has the paperwork ready for theft, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and misuse of HOA authority. Linda looked desperately at Dad, but he was already backing away, reputation flashing before his eyes. His business associates, golf partners, the people whose opinions actually mattered. None of them could be dismissed as too sensitive. The jewelry is in my safety deposit box, Linda whispered, voice shaking for the first time in 22 years. I'll return it all tonight. The potluck ended in chaos. Guests left hurriedly, already on their phones, spreading the Evergreen Acres scandal. Linda sat deflated at the head table. Decades of performance finally over. Dad couldn't even look at me, this time not in anger, but in shame. Evan came over and hugged me. You did it, R.A. You actually did it. I had. But standing there in the house that had never felt like home, watching the woman who had tormented me for 22 years finally faced consequences. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Jennifer checked her watch. Bank vault access closes at 9. We should go now. Linda looked up at me, and for the first time I saw fear instead of superiority. Rachel, surely we can work something out privately. No, I cut her off. You had 22 years. You chose this. The drive to the bank was silent, except for Jennifer calmly explaining the legal implications. Full cooperation might avoid criminal charges. Might. Linda's hands shook so badly she could barely sign the forms. When the vault opened, the extent of her theft spilled out: Mom's pearls, wedding ring, emerald ring, sapphire earrings, plus pieces I didn't even know existed from other families. I picked up a ruby band. This was Great Aunt Helen's. She wanted it to go to her daughter. You told everyone it must have been misplaced. Linda nodded mutely. Jennifer photographed every piece as we cataloged the return. When we finally drove back, Dad sat alone in the dark living room. The caterers had cleaned up and left. Evan was making coffee in the kitchen. Rachel, Dad started, voice hollow. I held up a hand. I'm done. I got what belonged to Mom. What belonged to me. That's all I wanted. You destroyed everything, he said. My reputation. Linda's standing in the community. No, I replied quietly. Linda destroyed it when she chose to steal. You destroyed it when you chose her over your own daughter again and again and again. He finally looked at me. Really looked, for perhaps the first time in 22 years. I thought I was doing what was best. You were so emotional after your mother died. Linda said you needed structure. I needed a father, I said. I needed someone to believe me. Just once. The silence stretched with 2 decades of what-ifs. I'll be moving out tomorrow, I continued. Maya found me a design position in Portland. Entry level. But it's mine. You don't have to. Yes, I do. For the first time in my life, I actually do have to leave. Not because I'm running away, but because I'm running towards something better. Linda never returned to the house that night. She went to stay with a friend, though how many friends she had left after the potluck was questionable. The Evergreen Acres gossip mill would ensure everyone knew the story by morning. Evan helped me pack the next day. We divided Mom's jewelry. He took a few pieces for his future wife. I kept the ones that held the most memories: the pearl necklace, the emerald ring, the charm bracelet with tiny milestones of my childhood that Linda had tried to erase along with everything else. You know Dad will never forgive you, Evan said as we loaded my car. I know, I replied. But maybe someday he'll understand that I had to stop forgiving him. As I drove away from Evergreen Acres for the last time, the welcome sign mocked me one final time: a community of standards. I smiled for the first time in weeks. The standards had finally been enforced on the right person. 3 months later, I got a call from Dad. Linda had been quietly removed from every charity board and social committee. She'd paid restitution to several families for items confiscated over the years. She'd moved to Florida to live with a cousin who didn't know the full story yet. I've been seeing a therapist, Dad said, the words awkward in his mouth. She says I have a lot to work through about your mother, about you, about everything. That's good. Dad, I'm in it. Maybe someday, when you're ready, we could talk. Really talk. Maybe, I said. But not today. Today, I was designing a campaign for a nonprofit that helped grieving children, pouring my own experiences into materials that screamed believe them. Today, I was having dinner with friends who never once called me dramatic when I said I wasn't feeling well. Today, I was wearing Mom's pearl necklace on a date with someone who thought my emotions were a feature, not a violation. Today, I was free. I stood in my new Portland apartment, the walls painted the same soft sage green I'd chosen years ago. Mom's jewelry box sat open on my dresser. I picked up her wedding ring. For 22 years, it had been locked away, then stolen, then hidden in a bank vault under the guise of community standards. Now it caught the afternoon light through my window, sparkling with all the love it had once represented. You were right. Mom, I whispered to the empty room. These pieces do carry the love of generations of women, and that love does belong to me. I had fought for that love, that legacy, that proof that I belonged somewhere to someone, even if she was gone. And in fighting for it, I had found something even more valuable, the knowledge that I was worth fighting for, that my truth was valid, that being sensitive wasn't a weakness, but the strength that ultimately saved me. The girl the HOA Karen had tried to find out of existence had become a woman who chose her own community. And that, more than any jewelry, was my mother's true inheritance to me.